that?
Miss Hannah would certainly,
Yes,
very certainly
she
agree
would.
with
She
it.
probably has this shirt, actually.
Yeah, so something like it. That is true.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock, and we are going to call to order the meeting for the CPOB Board for today, September 6th, is it? 4th? September 4th, 2024. We'll start off with roll call. Mr. Gibbon?
Here.
Mr. Peoples?
Here.
Ms. Hawkins?
Here.
Ms. Castle?
Here.
Mr. Costa?
Present.
Ms. Jones?
Here.
Anna Skevich here. Chairman Boyd and member Ms. Richards are absent tonight. Next on the agenda, can I have an approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting and a second, please, from someone?
I'll second. Or was that a motion you made?
A motion to approve the meeting?
I'll second.
So moved. Are you seconding or moving?
She made the
Oh,
motion,
okay, all
I
right.
seconded.
Do I have to roll call that? I didn't think so. Okay. Next, we have the reading of
You
the...
do have to ask for all in favor and all.
Oh, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Reading of the CPOB values and purpose, please, by Ms. Castle.
The overarching mission of the Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board is to foster conditions and police practices that ensure the safety of all residents of the city of Akron. The CPOB is empowered by a new city charter provision to independently direct the police auditor, whose office reviews investigations into complaints and misconduct involving officers. The board and auditor also review every standard investigation, whether by the Akron Police Department or outside agencies, into the use of deadly force by an officer. The values. Our decisions and actions are motivated by our love for Akron and our desire for all to feel safe in the community. We value unity in voice and action. We respect each other and those we serve. We seek to build relationships of trust, and we seek to always conduct ourselves with integrity. We listen to understand, learn, and lead. We strive to be inclusive of all stakeholders' voices. We value change at a system level. We hold ourselves accountable for our actions and deeds, and we hold our partners and those that we serve to be accountable for their actions and deeds.
Thank you, Ms. Castle. Next, we have on agenda public comments. We get a total of a half an hour for public comments, three minutes per person. And we're going to have Ms. Jones call whoever you have for public comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We have one form that's been submitted, one request by Apostolate.
Okay. Ms. Apostolate, before you start, I'm going to set a timer, and when you hear it beep, then you know that your time is up, okay? I'm not going to cut you off in the middle of your sentence.
I appreciate
or
that.
anything.
And I want to thank you for considering my
Oh,
concerns from last
Yeah,
week.
not a problem.
Before I go with what I came for this evening, I want to say to the people in Alapatchee, Georgia, my children didn't come home from school today either one time either because of gun violence. And my heart goes out to you. And before I go to another thing I would like to say is I just asked Mr. Fennell, what happens when you don't concur or agree with the decisions and the APD findings? What's the next step? And I think it's more than unreasonable that the mayor and the administration have not gotten back to you all to address your disagreement with their findings from April 17th of 2024. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not reasonable, it's not acceptable. You all work very hard for us, and they owe you that. And that's very disrespectful. And if you need my support in writing something, I'll do that for you. I'm here this evening because last time I saw you, I was very bothered by decisions and actions made by APD when Daniel Horrigan was the clerk of courts here in Summit County in Akron. My son is sitting in a jail now, being abused because of bad decisions from the Akron Police Department working with the Cleveland Police Department and the Indianapolis, Indiana Police Department, who stole my son when he was 5 years old. And they've been trafficking him in these jails ever since. And every effort I make to have a conversation with Akron Police Department, I am not only discounted and disrespected, but I am labeled, and it's not fair, it's not right, and I don't have anyone who has looked into this. And one time they actually handcuffed him and maced him while he was on the floor, and they knocked my son's tooth out of his mouth in one of these incarceration processes and knocked his front tooth. And here recently in the jail that he's in now, they hid his tooth from him, so now he has no tooth, and they're just dehumanizing him. And my other 3 children are challenged too. And no one's doing anything about APD's behavior, and my ex-husband is here in Akron having favors done through APD. He's a Baptist preacher here in Akron. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Apostle. Okay. Before we go any further, before our meeting tonight, shortly before our meeting started tonight, there was a terrible shooting in Texas, a school shooting in Texas.
Georgia.
Excuse me, in Georgia. And I believe the shooter is like 14 years old, something like that. That's just awful. And I think that, I think there are 4 dead.
4 dead and 9 in the hospital. 2 teachers and 2 students.
I can't even imagine. So I would just like for us to have a moment of silence for the victims of that shooting, because this has just really gotten out of hand. So we'll just take a moment of silence, and then we'll move on. Okay. Okay. Next on our agenda are our committee reports. So our first report is the auditor report, but before you get to that, Mr. Fennell, we have a new addition to our staff, which is Ms. Keisha Meyer. She is now our deputy auditor, and I would like to say welcome, and we hope that you enjoyed joining our team. And if you could just tell the public a little bit about yourself and what you think of being a deputy auditor so far. I know it's only been a couple days, but what are you thinking so far?
Well, thank you for the welcome. So far, I feel very supported. I feel welcomed. Mr. Fennell is going to be phenomenal to work with. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's a seasoned veteran. I have the utmost respect for him, and just really just looking forward to kind of roll up my sleeves and get busy. And I am appreciative of the board and the vote of confidence, and looking forward to doing the work on behalf of the city of Akron and the community at large. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. Anyone else? Anybody, any comments, anything? Anybody? Okay. Mr. Fennell, you are up next.
Thank you, and thank you, Keisha. And I was going to allow her that opportunity, so thank you, Vice Chair, for allowing her to speak to everyone. She's hit the ground running. I will say that we're pleased to have her on board, and she's already started looking at some cases and offering some perspective that I did not see, and it's been very helpful. So likewise, I'm looking forward to working with you as well. I passed out a copy of an overview of what we've done in the office since our last board meeting. The two reports that we spoke about, that I spoke about at our last meeting, I did submit the memos to the mayor and the council. So as with the other memos, we're awaiting response. You'll note that there's not a lot of cases that have been reviewed during this time period because we have really, number one, shifted the focus. I've shifted the focus to make sure that Ms. Myers is receiving the training she needs, and also really shift the focus to meet with vendors on trying to develop our case management and database, which is still a priority. That is now the new priority of our office. We are working, I am working with IT, and we're going to be creating an RFP so that we can send that out to get responses for case management and database development. So once that RFP has been created, we'll follow the process through purchasing and get that pushed out to the public. I will make that announcement and make sure that it's shared with the board and the community as well. The process and procedures process is going very well. On today, we actually received access to the APD Blue Team, and I received a case through the Blue Team system. There's still a glitch in with IT and some credentialing, so we're working through that process to make sure that both myself and the deputy auditor have the full credentials to access the system, but we are receiving those cases through the Blue Team, so at least that part of it is working properly. And for those that don't know, the Blue Team is the system that APD uses when they move a use of force case or a internal investigative file between investigators or between supervisors. So we are now in that queue so that once the investigation has been completed, has been reviewed by the appropriate staff on APD's side, then I will get an alert via email that tells me that a particular file is ready for our review, and then I can click on the link and should open it up. And once it opens, I can either accept it for myself or assign it to another staff member, and assign it to the deputy auditor or someone else in the office to look at it. And then once that is done, they'll assign it back to me, and then I can review it, sign off on it, whether we concur or do not concur, and begin our normal process of report writing and send it back to APD. And so once I do that, all of the documentation will be contained in their file, and it'll be contained in our file, so we'll all have the same information. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so just a quick question. When you receive the link, is that after all of their investigations are done, including internal affairs, or is it between supervisors, APD supervisor investigations, then it comes to you, and then it goes to internal affairs? Do you know?
It will be after APD has completed their investigation. It's gone through the entire process. Okay. And by having this access, we no longer will have to, APD will no longer have to scan and upload documents into a shared drive folder, which we will then have to go in and find the document. There will be no, currently with the shared file folder, there is no notification to myself when a new file goes in. So that means I have to check it daily and look to see, when a file has been uploaded, versus them just being able to do a drop down, pop my name in, that it's assigned to me, and then it sends an email to me. So hopefully this will be more efficient. We still have over 500 files in our shared drive folder that we have to manually go through and do the process. But going forward, once we get through those 500, we'll no longer have to worry about going into that folder to address those files.
Interesting. It sounds very efficient.
Yeah, well, it's a start. Again, like I said before, said initially, and I'll keep saying, the most efficient way is to give us full and unfettered access that the internal affairs and supervisors have. That way we can go in and not have to worry about all of this. But this is much better than it has been and what it's been before. And also, as part of the case management and database development, I plan to hire some interns to assist with the data input of that information. So we have the final version of the job announcement for the high school interns. HR is coordinating with Akron Public Schools to initiate that process, and I hope to have that announcement posted within the next 2 weeks once all of the other internal logistics are taken care of between HR and APS. We're hoping to get 6 to 8 interns, each working a 4-hour day, 2 or 3 days a week. And we anticipate getting, once we have those interns in place and with the training we'll provide to them, that we anticipate getting those 500 cases full of data loaded into our system within 8 to 12 weeks. That's our timeline.
So, you know, I have a question.
Go ahead.
A question/concern. I think we talked about this the last meeting, about the vetting process with these kids and confidentiality, how we are going to ensure confidentiality of the citizens, of the files, the information. Do you have an idea how that's how the training for that's going to take place?
Yes, I do. The vetting process, we will rely heavily on the Akron Public School counselors to help identify the student candidates that are best suited for this type of work with the understanding of the type of information they'll be viewing and working with. I'll also work, and our deputy auditor will also work with the students to, again, emphasize to them the importance of confidentiality. We'll have a confidentiality form that we use internally in our office that's been developed by city law. We may, and I'll work with law to see if there's any adjustments that need to be made with that form. But most of these students are 17 or 18 years old, so they still are, if we were using college freshmen, they're in that 17, 18, 19-year range. And I believe that because these students understand that this is also goes towards their grade and it's part of their curriculum, that we won't have any problems with confidentiality. And truth be told, if they see something that involves one of their friends, they probably know more about it than it's in the report in the first place. So they're not going to be seeing anything new, that they didn't know. But I think together, this is a learning opportunity to teach them, particularly if they want to get into criminal justice, the importance of, handling confidential information and why it's so important to the overall process of the criminal justice system that they maintain that. So I don't personally have any concerns with it. I think we'll take the proper measures to train them and teach them, and it's all part of the learning process, particularly in a professional environment for these young people.
Okay, well, again, I'm more than willing to help with any training, do some like one-day training with some vignettes, some scenarios, and see how they work with it, that involves confidentiality, see if they get it or they're not getting it.
Right.
So
And there's some internal policies I'm gonna have in place, restricting cell phone usage while they are working. There's just certain things I'm gonna have to put in place. But they're not gonna have access to any information they can carry with them. And I think when they open one of these files and they see the amount of data that has to go from the file to the database, they're not gonna really get into, I don't believe they'll get into all that other stuff of trying to read too much into it. They'll be moving data from one place to the other.
sounds good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Training, our deputy auditor will begin internal affairs training starting tomorrow. This is a virtual course. It covers a 4.5-day period over the next 4 weeks, with the last week being a Thursday and Friday training. This will be the first of many training opportunities she's going to participate in over the next 6 months. I've got training scheduled for the NACO conference in October. She's already completed several webinars related to Oversight, and there will be an advanced internal affairs training opportunity that will present itself in, I believe, January of 2025, which this course that she starts tomorrow is the prerequisite for that course. And again, I think it's like a four-week virtual course. So we're identifying other opportunities where she can get various training specifically in investigative techniques and matters related to oversight to enhance the skills she already brings to the position. And community activities, I presented at the Freedom Block Safety Meeting on August 21st, had a very robust conversation with the folks that were in attendance, and look forward to meeting and speaking with them again in the future. So that concludes, I believe, my report.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Any discussion, questions from Mr. Fennell?
Yes, I have a couple of questions, and this might be for Mr. Fennell or just anyone on the board, but I noticed that we get the citizen complaints about police conduct, and they go to, so my question is, whose role, is it your role to respond to those complaints? I know there's one in particular by a Mr. Smith, and it's a whole scenario of someone coming to his parents' home, and then he asks a bunch of questions, which I feel are pretty relevant and insightful with regard to what role does the citizen play when the police comes to the residence and they want to come in, and do they have the right? I know we do a lot of citizen education with regard to when you are stopped by an officer and what to do with your hands and all of that, but I felt like his questions at the end of his complaint were relevant with regard to what's the procedure, what's the rights without a warrant, and I just wondered, is it your role to answer those questions? Is it the police's role? Is it the board's role? I think that this is a great opportunity to educate our public.
Yes, ma'am, and regarding that specific complaint, Mr. Smith followed up with me directly with an email directly to me with information about his father and his father's home phone number. I spoke with his father on yesterday, and we had a long discussion about what occurred. I will say that the father has a different position. I'll leave it at that without specifics. But I did reach out to him. Now, with respect to the actual complaint that was filed, that all of those complaints that come through our website or through the police auditor email are forwarded to APD complaints. So it gets logged in and sent to APD to initiate an investigation into that complaint. I did not provide specific responses to those answers to the son because I wanted to talk to the father first, as the son had directed me. After that conversation with the father, I still didn't respond to those questions, so I'm gonna wait until APD has completed their investigation to see if those questions are addressed through their investigation. So I don't want to give conflicting information, and again, based on the father's account, there is some variances there that may need to be dealt with the investigation that's conducted by APD. So I didn't want to get into an email exchange back and forth. Now, going forward, and I can't speak for the board, I know on some occasions the chair will send out a response, and it's normally a general response that acknowledges the complaint and also reinforces that someone from my office will respond to that complainant. And in those cases, I usually respond directly to the complainant, as well as we have a general response that we always send that allows people to know that we've received the complaint and that it's forwarded to APD complaints for further investigation.
So do you know, once it comes to you, and then you respond as you see appropriate, maybe in depth or not, depending on how much information and what your investigation reveals, and it goes back to APD, then does anybody know what process happens? In other words, what kind of outcomes come out of a citizen complaint that might help one further the relationships of trust between the police and the community, as well as with the board, and again, miss opportunities or at least address opportunities for citizen education. So is there a particular, and again, this is for anybody, is there a particular department in the police force that gives written responses, or is that just something that you do, and then I don't know, I'm just wondering what the police does and how we can all learn from these situations and not just this specific situation.
Right. Well, APD will send out a response. Now, if they choose for whatever reason not to initiate an investigation based on the information provided in the complaint, they'll send out a response that effectively states that. If they do initiate an investigation, they'll correspond with the complainant to let them know an investigation has been initiated and to whom it's assigned. And then once that investigation is complete, they'll respond to that individual to let them know an investigation has been complete and what the outcome is.
Okay.
Now, if the complainant does not agree with the outcome, normally they've contacted us again. And from there, I can look into what was done and see if I agree with the outcome or not, but I cannot reinvestigate it. Okay? So that is the difference.
Okay. And if you don't agree, then you just make a report? You put in a report?
I can make a report that states where I see and where I disagree.
Okay. Thank you.
And actually, that report comes through the review committee to the board.
Okay. And then what's the review committee's role?
Review just gives an initial meeting with the auditor about the case and might have suggestions concerning the report, and then the report and recommendation then comes to the full board, and we actually, I'd be surprised if we ever disapproved a recommended report of the auditor, but the reports all have come here finally for our vote.
Okay.
I would like to add that at our last board meeting, one of the reports that we discussed, although it was a use of force by APD, it also came into our office directly as a complaint.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So the complaint was also forwarded over to APD. So I was going to review that anyway. So I reviewed the use of force, which aligned with the complaint. Well, the use of force didn't align with the complaint, but there was a part of that use of force where the grandmother thought it was, inappropriate. So she filed a complaint on that part. So through my course of investigating the use of force, I was able to also address her complaint.
Okay. Thank you.
Also, correct me, Ms. Jones, if I have this wrong. I think what you were asking too, like in a situation like what you were describing, how would the general public be able to know how to respond to situations like that?
That's right.
Okay, so I'm thinking that community engagement, like that would be like a community engagement effort. Like if there's something, if the general public doesn't know how to respond to the police coming to their door, and if they don't want to open the door, what's the right way to handle it, what's the wrong way to handle it? I would think that that's something that could also be integrated into maybe the next community engagement event that we have, something just for informational purposes. I think that's what I thought I heard you say.
That
How
is.
does that information get out to the general public?
That's right, and how can we work with the police department to make sure that the public is getting accurate information, complete information, again, in an effort to build relationships of trust. And so when some, especially with cases where particularly African Americans are being killed in their own homes, Breonna Taylor, Sonia Massey just recently, people have sort of a legitimate concern about letting police officers into their homes. And so to be able to just have a general sort of community-wide education campaign so people can know, what to do in those situations and how we can all be on the same page would be helpful, I would think.
I would resist the board from taking the position as to advising individuals what their legal rights are with respect to law enforcement. But what I would encourage us to do are to highlight our community partners that are doing that type of work, such as the NAACP, and to create space and to invite them in so they may do that, just so we are not stepping into the role of any type of legal advisors to the general public.
Yeah.
And that's where I was headed with that. There are several, what I call Know Your Rights campaigns that, like the NAACP, ACLU, various bar legal associations, not just here in Akron or in Ohio, but across the country, present. And a little research, a little Googling, you can find, flyers that have been created and various documents that legal advisors have prepared that give a general overview of basically what your rights are when you're stopped by the police, or a traffic stop, or when they knock at your door. But again, going back to like those specific questions, I pull back on giving specific answers to those questions. I'm not an attorney, and I don't feel like our role as independent auditor, we should provide answers to such questions that are have such a legal basis to them.
I get you.
So that's why presenting those questions maybe and working with some of these other groups would be something that maybe we could look into.
I get you. And maybe I'm a little naive or overly optimistic, but I was thinking of basically us having, or whatever the groups are, having a partnership with the police department so that the answers that are given are in collaboration with them so everybody could be on the same board. It's not a us versus them kind of thing, but we're all working together, not giving legal advice, but this is coming directly from, that's why I was asking you earlier about what their procedures manual looks like. Bob, you and I had at our lunch last week, we talked about a procedures manual so that maybe it speaks to this already so that we can then inform the public what it says so people can be informed. And it's not giving a legal opinion, it's just really letting people know what's already out there.
Ms. Vice Chair.
Yes, Mr. Giffen.
Yeah, those are really good points, and I think the ideas Mr. Costa brought out that I think there are ways that we can facilitate communication from those like legal aid, others, who have that expertise and want to communicate to the public. But one thing that when you were talking about the police department, though, the one thing that I'm remembering is that when we had our year and a half ago, we had some good presentation. Oh, I guess it was the police academy, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. At the police academy, I think the first night, the police legal advisor, the member of the law department, in the prosecutor's office, and one of the other staff members, both presented, and it kind of got off a bit into that whole area of sort of the public understanding expectations. And I really, really would be confident that if we were to invite the police legal advisor to participate in some sort of community event that might also include legal aid people, I don't know, but I just have the sense that they, for all the right reasons, want the public to understand how their rights, but also how to best manage the situations that arise. So I think that's a really good direction to take, I really do.
And that's where I was going with, like, maybe this is something that can go under the umbrella of our community engagement. And again, not us giving legal advice, but having the people
Right.
who can come into a community
Or facilitate
engagement
something,
event. Yeah, and just have the public there, and then have it like an informational event for the public.
I think it'd be excellent.
I think that would be an excellent
And not just once,
idea.
probably.
Yeah, so.
Thank you, that sounds great.
I had one other, and maybe I should know this, but I don't, so I'm gonna ask. Do you get involved, are we getting involved, are you, the auditor, getting involved in anything that doesn't come through the normal system of complaints? For example, the situation that happened with the U-Haul over the weekend, last weekend. Is that something that we would look into automatically, whether or not that victim's family member complains or not? Or do you have to wait and have a family member file a complaint with the CPOP board about his death?
No, I will automatically review that situation, that incident, that shooting, once the Ohio, what's it?
BCI?
BCI conducts their investigation, then APD and the grand jury conduct their investigation, and then it is, once all of the investigations are complete, then my office will look into it. Nothing stops me from looking now, but I'm not going to report on anything. I'm not going to form an opinion. And so, we have quite a bit of work to do. So at this point, I have not looked into it beyond looking at the public video.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that eventually it'll get to us, but you have to let all the others go first.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
which is what I
It
kept
is
thinking.
also a use of force, so it falls under a review of the use of force.
No parallel investigations. That's what I kept telling you guys from the beginning, that everybody else do theirs first. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions, comments for Mr. Fennell about anything?
Just a little piggyback off of that, I think that, and this is probably already done, I think there's an expectation of the community that for some reason, the board and the auditor's office is going to be on that, and so they can come, like at the governance meeting the last time, with Channel 3 showing up, thinking that we had a comment, and, that's just not the process that we're using. So the more we can educate the public as to what our role is and is not, I think it would be helpful.
Yes, and I've taken those opportunities. Obviously, traumatic tragedy such as an officer-involved shooting happens, and I've received numerous calls directly from the media. So I've taken the opportunity to educate them why I will not make a comment on anything at this point, and so that they understand that, the video is but one piece of the evidence for this entire investigation. So I wouldn't comment on any one piece of evidence on any other case, and I won't comment on that video.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr.
Ms. Vice Chair,
Giffen?
yeah, I think that's, again, very, very correct of the concern we need to have about, the community's view of what we do. I have really felt that, particularly those parts of the community that are active, in their concern about, police conduct. I have the feeling, and maybe we need to be corrected on this, but that there is an understanding of how, at least under the current rules that we have, that we can only review after the fact, and that, of course, it's inappropriate for us to comment, on an ongoing basis and forming prejudgments. I have the sense that people are understanding that. We're going to need to vindicate it when some of the largest cases, finally come to the auditor, and we're having to, he initially, and then we together will say what we have to say about them. But I think my sense is that the public is understanding that, or at least the part that is watching, and that's a good thing. Now, all that, I think it's worth saying, perhaps to the public, of course we're aware of all that, and the auditor's aware of all that, and the deputy auditor of that. Of course we are. And, just as we are, careful not to form prejudgments, we have our feelings about what we're seeing, and don't think we don't. We very much do, and I hope the public understands that.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. That's well said, Mr.
Vice Chair, I'm wondering if it makes sense, maybe we could bring this to governance, but I'm wondering if it makes sense for us to add just like a one-sentence disclaimer with any of the public statements that we do make with respect to a community tragedy to say, just like a quick, the board shall not make, the board is, per our current rules, the board does not have the authority to investigate any matter that is under the, oversight of APD and or BCI until it's been completed. Just as a way to continuously inform people to say that we will not be taking action on this per the current rules and the fact that we don't actually have the ability to. So we both acknowledge it, but then also add a little bit of disclaimer, informational statement to say, even if we wanted to, we don't have the ability to do this at this point. So then we're continuously reminding people, we're acknowledging this, but we don't have the ability to actually act at this point.
Yeah, hopefully I'll remember it, you'll remember it, and we'll talk about it at governance.
I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Anyone else? Okay, that complete your report, Mr. Fennell?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, next we have governance, Mr. Gibbon.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. Two matters, no action matters. One, I'll call it happy. I think we're finally in the last stages of getting the annual report done. The expectation is that we'll be looking at a final draft at governance, which I should say, we are shifting the meeting day, mostly to accommodate Ms. Castle's work schedule. In general, governance is going to meet on the off Wednesdays, not Tuesdays, which means the next meeting will be the 11th, a week from tonight. Still 5:30 at some or other library branch. But I think we're in the last stages. It's a team effort, so we should have a draft. The work that needs to be done still, it'll be in the letter form, but sort of an executive summary for the public, so those who don't want to read the full report. And then it needs to be brought up to date because it's going to be, we think it should be to the end of August, to be current as opposed to literally annual. So there's some work to be done, for things that have happened since the last draft. But I think it's, and Ms. Castle did most of the work on it. I think it's going to be just a really, really excellent report. And I hope the public will enjoy reading it and will have a better understanding of what we've done in this year and a half. The less happy news, we still have no progress on the independent legal counsel issue. We've been having communications, some meetings for a while. It got to the point we received a draft request for proposal from the law department early in August. And a proposed revision was sent back on August 19. Hit a few things. It needed to include the auditor, not just the board. But the real central issue is how the degree of control or influence the law department will have in that. And that's why we sent back a proposed revision. We have not heard anything further since August 19. I've spoken with the chairman about it, and we're going to request a meeting with the mayor's office and the law department to hopefully that will move the ball along and we can finally resolve it and come together with something that we're all in agreement on. But so far, no.
What's the disagreement? Is there a valid disagreement or a concrete, not valid, but concrete disagreement?
It's in the wording. I mean, you know, it's not exactly legalese, but it's close. But there is just I think we still have a difference concerning the degree of control that the law department would exercise as to the independent legal counsel, and that's what needs to be resolved. It's language, but that's the core of it.
Okay. That sounds like an oxymoron to me, control with the law department, but independent counsel for us.
Well, there's a reason, the law department has a legitimate reason to not, you know, there's a level of control the law department has to have. Okay. And certainly in the process of selecting the independent counsel, that for sure. Because the law department, per the charter, is our legal advisor. All right, so all of this has to flow through the law department. But in order to be viable, you know, that is to say that we're actually getting independent legal counsel, legal advice, all right? That's where the nuance comes. And I mean, it wasn't just me alone, but we were careful not to violate sunshine as far as number of people participating in the review of the draft. But we think that the revision that was sent to the law department on August 19, we think strikes the appropriate balance. In other words, recognizing the law department has to have a role, but at the same time, preserving the independence of the legal advice we would get. Because that's really the objective, is that advice, in the end, is going to be independent.
Okay.
So that's where we are. And the chair and I felt that we could move matters forward best by requesting a meeting, so that's going to happen.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Gippen or a conversation about what he had to share? All right. Thank you, Mr. Gippen. Next, we have community engagement. Ms. Hawkins. Could you put your mic down? Okay. Turn the mic. Thank you.
All right. On 8/14 at our last meeting, I was told to call Michelle about a survey that her company was going to do for community engagement previously. And because we were talking about buying computers and not being able to afford computers, I wondered if we were still able to afford $20,000 to pay her to do a survey. So I did call Mr. Fennell on 8/15, and he said that we didn't have it in the budget any longer. So I called and let Michelle know that we wouldn't be using her services because we couldn't afford it.
If I might, sorry, we definitely have the money in the budget. We carried over that money from last year's budget. So we specifically do have the money allocated under the budget.
Chair, may I speak?
One second. Okay. What was the $20,000 for?
For paying her to do a survey.
What type of survey again?
She was supposed to go, she said that she was going to be doing a survey of African-American males. I think she said from the ages of 17 to like 55, to see what their fear of the police in the community.
Okay.
And then I guess take her findings and report back to us.
How was she going to conduct that survey?
I did ask her. She said that she was going to do phone calls and she was going to do home visits as well as just going out to the community. And she was also going to send text messages out. And so I did tell her that I didn't think that, as far as like reaching out to my clientele for 25 years as a social worker, sometimes when you call, when you go to a home visit, and as well as text messaging, their phone numbers change a lot, as well as their address changes a lot. And I did discuss that with Mr. Fennell when I called him, also with her, you know, her type of measurements.
Well, okay.
And then I did talk to Mr. Kemp about it also. And he was talking about with community engagement, you guys had discussed getting some name badges in the past and going to community events with name badges on so that they can see that we represent the board. And so he told me to bring that back up and see what people wanted to do about that and just kind of be seen at community events, not necessarily putting on programs in the community.
Ms. Castle?
Madam Vice Chair, if I may, perhaps this is something, because I know we haven't had a community engagement committee meeting, because these are all things that we could definitely discuss and maybe make some recommendations to bring back to the board so we can do a more in-depth dive into it. So I know at one point we did have a couple of the different proposals for the survey company, and it was at different levels of different things. So I know we had talked about that in the past, but I'm just wondering if this is something that we can maybe get a date for community engagement on the calendar so that we could maybe discuss that as a committee. Same thing with the name badges as well.
Okay. I was only given one group, so it was other groups that you guys had?
We had one group, but they had submitted different proposals to us that had the different tiers of what we were trying to gather from that survey. And now that we're in a different space as a board with maybe what we're looking at and what those discussions were, it might be more appropriate for us to discuss that in depth at that committee meeting to be able to bring it back to the board.
I asked people for information, and all I was given was her name and number, so I don't have any information.
Well, I think the proposal also, I think we sent you the proposal.
So,
But I agree with Ms. Castle. I mean, this is a committee function, not, and we really need to discuss these things. For myself, I very strongly support the idea of putting on community events. I think it's like of the sorts of things we were talking about, but not just that. I don't think we can just show up. I think we have to initiate if we're really going to do our job of community engagement. So I really hope we have a committee meeting soon, particularly with governance now shifted to Wednesdays. That should open up the Tuesdays where we had the one collision of dates. So I hope, because it is not just the chair, it is a committee function, any more than governance or review, any of them.
I agree, and I think you should maybe schedule a community engagement meeting.
okay.
Because I even have some concerns about what you just said about how she plans to do her how she plans to do her survey for that $20,000.
Right.
Not just the money, but I think some of what she may have described to you, in my mind's eye, having been an investigator, federal investigator, I think it's a little dangerous. You don't just go to people's houses today. So I think it needs to be discussed in a community engagement meeting.
Okay.
I do.
Hey, I'm sorry, Mr. Fennell, because I know you want. My recollection is that at our last meeting, we had took a step back and said maybe we need to reevaluate first the utility of doing a survey at this point, even first. So I think that should probably.
I can't hear you.
At our last meeting, we discussed about whether or not it even makes sense to do a survey at this point, and the utility of doing that versus some of the other things that we have going on, and the value received based upon the survey. I don't remember the scope of the survey among respondents being that narrow and that limited to like just that population. I could be wrong, but I don't believe that was. And I would probably push back on. But anyway, we don't need to dive that much deeper into it, but I did want to highlight the fact that we had kind of said we should bring in Mr. Fennell' expertise to figure out from a department-wide standpoint whether or not that might be the best use of resources, and perhaps that might be where the disconnect could have potentially been.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Mr. Fennell?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. I looked at the proposal that was presented and sent out, and I also looked at the proposed cost of the proposal and what the respondents' method for developing their survey and what they claim to be able to get out of such a survey. And then my question was, well, what first off, I don't believe that their method would be successful in getting any information that we need.
Yeah.
And secondly, and this is where we can fully vet this out at the committee level, is what is the purpose of the survey? I believe the community has already spoken. I believe we are doing what the community has asked. I don't believe spending money on a survey that, one, staff-wise, we don't have staff to implement any findings from a survey at this point, and we won't for a while. And then number two, those financial resources need to be used to upgrade our IT needs, our database needs. We have I'm meeting with other vendors, and I'm early in the stages on that, but IT and technology needs that will help us do the work we need to do. So when I spoke with Ms. Hawkins, I told her that this proposal was not anything that I saw would be beneficial in this. I don't believe that the respondents have a grasp of what we in this organization and this board is trying to accomplish. So I don't see a need for a survey. And when I said about the money, yes, the money is there, but that money is part of the budget review that I'm currently conducting, because we have money set aside in the budget for things we're not going to use by the end of the year, nor do we need to use or have. And I understand why they're in the budget, but now that we're here and we're doing the work, I know I'm finding out what we need, and I'll be bringing that to the board in the future during the budget season. But there's monies that are there that need to be reallocated, and I'm in the process of looking at what funds we can move to the places we need to use, and a survey is not one of them, and I don't foresee that being beneficial to what we need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Purnell. Appreciate your insight on that. I know you are familiar with boards and how they work and what their needs are, so I really appreciate you offering us that insight. Thank you. Anyone else?
The only thing that I'm just thinking, and again, I know this will be fully talked about and discussed at the committee level, but in terms of a survey, we talk about a community engagement, we talk about having, events, so that people can come together, learn more about, law enforcement can learn our community, we can develop relationships of trust so that ultimately if there's a tragic event or a crime or a shooting or whatever, we're all working together rather than against each other. And again, that is going to be a difficult, given the present environment, it's going to be difficult to develop this, but I would say that even if there ever is a survey, it would go more toward gathering ideas of how to develop relationships of trust, and then the community engagement activities would be centered around maybe sort of that as opposed to anything else. I think that would be helpful because we do want to know what the public thinks about how do we go about doing that, because the relationships are fractured and need healing. So just my thought.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, I was going to say, does anybody else have time to do this committee? Because I just can't find time to do.
Does anyone have time to
do the community engagement?
To be the chair?
I haven't, yes, because I haven't found time to schedule a meeting.
Well, maybe that's something we can discuss.
Okay.
Moving forward when Mr. Kemp comes back.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Finance, Mr. Costa?
I think, so very quickly, I think most of the budget and finance activity has been brought up kind of through various discussions throughout this board meeting. So very quickly, I will say Mr. Fennell has recently met with Steve Fricker, the finance director, as well as folks from the mayoral administration to start a discussion about refining the budget process. And I think a very astute observation from Mr. Fennell was the fact that, granted that we didn't have a department head in this prior year, that there really wasn't any involvement there. So I think making, us making the budget, the annual budget process much more akin to similar processes that go through the board, being that Mr. Fennell comes up with a board with a proposal that either through the Budget and Finance Committee, and then we bring that to the board for their consideration, be the process moving forward. So we will continue those discussions. The big ticket item right now is figuring out what we need exactly for our data management process system, and figuring out how we can potentially pay for something even maybe above and beyond what we would really like. And so that's the kind of main activity going on there, as well as crafting the RFP for the related RFP to support that as well too. So I will be touching bases with Mr. Fennell and hoping to set up a budget and finance meeting in the coming month, so we can hammer out some of these aspects and give other board members and community members an opportunity to have input as well too.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Any questions? Anyone have any questions or anything? Comments?
Yes, I just want to state that myself and the team, the rest of the staff, we all met this afternoon, actually, just a couple hours ago, with the finance and mayoral directors and mayoral staff to discuss the budget process going forward. And so as they move into their budget season, I will be notified, and I'm already looking at our current budget and working to develop some of the needs that I see for the office. So I will present and put together a budget that we, again, will work through the Finance Committee, and then we'll bring it to the board for approval. So it will be streamlined to that extent, and working with the city to make sure that there's proper justification for the ask and the needs that we present, and move from in that direction. I have some ideas, but I want to make sure that they're feasible and that we can make it happen on short order, so that we can be as effective in our jobs and as an agency that we need to be.
Do you have a numerical figure of what the needs are? I know you talked about one earlier with IT, the database system. Are there some others?
I don't have a dollar amount for.
No, not a dollar amount, just like we need like A, B, C, D, that type of thing.
Well, obviously, again, priority-wise is the database. Once we get the data into the system, I foresee needing, at least on a part-time basis, a statistician, someone that can actually run numbers through that data, and then from those numbers, we see what the numbers tell us. We see what the trends tell us. We see what we don't know the data is going to show. We need to find that and be able to run that in various ways. I foresee looking for outliers. Outliers being officers that have more complaints than others. And then using that maybe as an early warning system type of approach to address other problems that may exist with particular officers. But statistically, I want it to be sound. I want it to be something that can be reviewed by peers and challenged, if challenged. And I don't want it to be an arbitrary number that puts an officer, say, as an outlier, or doesn't capture an officer that's an outlier. But I don't know this stuff until we get all of the data into the system. So, having someone with the expertise to run the various statistical programs to just see what the raw data tells us is someone we're going to need. And the charter amendment does allow for personnel as needed. So those are things that, again, I have to sit through, work through, see how, build a timeline and look at that and see when we can achieve those goals. But those are some things long-term.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Purnell. Anyone have any discussion on what Mr. Purnell said or questions? Okay, thank you. Next, we have Human Resources. Ms. Richards is the chair of our Human Resource Subcommittee, and she is absent tonight. And I am on that committee, and I don't have anything specific other than what I've already done, which is welcoming Ms. Myers to the auditor's office as our new deputy auditor, and giving her a chance to speak and let the public that's here anyway, and who are listening online, know a little bit about her. So that's all I would have for human resource, unless anyone else has anything.
Ms. Vice Chair, I think even with Bev not here, because this is really more for Mr. Fennell, but we're getting to the end of the year here. Are we developing an evaluation process for you and for
Right,
Ms.
the
Myers,
year-end review, yes.
Ms. Thompson?
I have not developed an evaluation process for Ms. Myers. I believe that when I first started, there was an automatic, there was an alert that came to me from personnel for Ms. Thompson, and it was her 6-month review. So I need to confirm if, because of her classification, if I automatically get those that I need to review, or if I have to create one for her position, because there's different parameters for each classification. And so there was an automatic 6-month one that popped up for her, and I was able to go through and complete that evaluation. So I don't know if that's the same for an annual in her position. Now, in my position, I have not begun to develop an evaluation. I figure that is something I will work through with the board. I think that's a two-way street there. So as with the Human Resources Committee, I think that's something that we'll create
And
through
we'll
there.
have to come up with something.
And whether it ought to be, a shortened year just to get on a year-to-year cycle, or ought to just be on your anniversary. But yeah, probably putting it as an item on the long list, because time moves fast.
It does, that it does. I do have one quick question. Do you consider, other than the statistician that you're thinking about, as of now, do you feel your office is fully staffed now, is that correct?
It is fully staffed. I am going to revisit the personal assistant. That's the title. What's this? I can't think right now.
No, I don't think that's the right.
Not the title. It's not admin 3. It's executive assistant.
She's not going to do your shopping.
Executive assistant. The executive assistant position, I'm going to revisit that in October. I've already started working with HR. And that's the only other position. I think the positions that we need to fill in the short term, we can do with interns for the
Okay.
tasks that need to be done. And then, again, once we get that system up and running and get it populated, I'll begin that process of looking at the statistician role and what that looks like.
Okay, but that pretty much would be it for your office for now, as far as...
In the foreseeable future, yes.
Future.
I mean, as the work develops, of course, we'll always be able to evaluate and come with recommendations for adjustments, but right now, that is the only other role I see, and at least beginning on a part-time basis.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Purnell. Anyone else? Okay, so number 5, 6, 7 are the chair's comments. Mr. Boyd's not here, but I do have a comment, and this with respect to, I was just thinking about this since we were talking about community engagement. when we first started, we were, for lack of a better term, bumbling through, trying to figure out how to be this board. And having a community engagement committee and a chair and that type of thing was viable at the time, and it was something that I think we really needed to do for us to help ourselves figure out who we were and what we were doing and how we were supposed to adhere to the demands of the public that voted to have us here, and to also stay within the parameters of what we knew we needed to do per, the powers that be here, the mayor's office, the law department, that type of thing. And as we were sitting here tonight discussing this about the community engagement, I'm not so sure we need to do it the same way anymore. I think we can have community engagement, but I think we can morph it into something different and something that's more meaningful. Taking some of Ms. Jones's comments and Mr. Costa's and Mr. Fennell's, I think we can have community engagement, but maybe we can do it differently. Maybe we should do it differently now, and I think we can, because now we know what we're doing as a board, because we don't have to worry about also being an auditor as a board and a deputy auditor as a board. So we're going to have community engagement. I just think we can do it differently now than what we've done. Yes.
Well, I think there's absolutely agree that there, what we do by way of community engagement now in this position that we're in after all these months look very different than where it was a year ago.
Yes.
But I hope I wasn't hearing you say that we ought not have a community engagement committee. Okay.
No, just do it differently.
Oh, I think there's lots of things we can do.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, just
totally
do it differently.
Agree. We need to, hopefully someone, will step up and want to be chair of that committee, because there's an awful lot to do.
Yeah, and that's why we need to have a meeting and figure out how to do it differently.
If I can really quickly,
Yes.
I think this board was created as a response to the community as a whole. And I think one thing that everyone who's tried to run the role is that if you're not careful, community engagement can be like a full-time job. Because especially if you're rooted in the community, if you care about the community, because it's a process and a service of love. So I think we absolutely have to have a strong community engagement committee, but I think we need to rethink how do we support the individual that's going to be in that role, and how do we hold ourselves accountable to supporting that individual so they don't have to take on too much. In addition to maybe even at some point revisiting our strategic plan, which kind of laid out the structure of all of our committees, to revisit the board kind of functionality as a whole, because I think that we've shifted in such a rapid degree. And I think we've really knocked out a lot of the goals that we set out for ourselves in a 3-year strategic plan in quite far less time. So those are just kind of my thoughts with it.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes, I have a question. So when you speak of community engagement and Vice Chair, you speak of community engagement, are you speaking for the board members and what the board members will do, or? And the reason I ask is because I am all over the place. I go to a lot of different meetings, and many of them aren't official, like police auditor official to be there to speak, but I am connecting and have made myself available to many different components and aspects of the Akron community. Ms. Myers is already deeply entrenched in the community, and already in her first week on the job, week and a half on the job, I've witnessed her connection to the community and how she's bringing the community into our office as far as they learning who we are and understanding who we are. So I would just caution, say, the board, and as you move through this process, that whatever actions or activities not be so reliant on the staff, but recognize that anything that you create, that is going to be hours that as board members you have to put in, and those hours are considered volunteer hours. So you're giving back, and so I know Ms. Hawkins made reference to her lack of time because she's got other things she has to do, and others have things they have to do. So I would just put that in your mind that you guys all have jobs outside of this. This is our job, and we're still going to be out after hours and on weekends, but we can't really create new stuff right now.
Well, and I totally concur with that, and that goes under, what you just said goes under the umbrella of doing community engagement differently now. That's what I mean by doing it differently. We cannot do it. We did it the way we did it because we didn't have you guys, okay? We didn't have you, so what we had to engage with the community in some way. We don't have to do it that way anymore because we now have you guys. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying we should eradicate it. One second, Mr. Gibbon. I'm not saying we should eradicate it. I'm not saying we should put it all on one person's shoulders. What I'm saying is, if we're going to continue to have, to Mr. Costa's point, engage the community, which we should very well do. The community seated us here. We just have to figure out how to do it differently than what we've done it. And that involves the fact that we have you two now. Okay, so that's what I mean. I think that's clear.
Well, Ms. Vice Chair?
Yes.
The short answer to the question is, at least as I see it, is yes, we're primarily talking about what board members would do. I think the last thing that we should be doing is, adding to the workload of you and your staff. That said, and my sense is that at least this board is willing to do the work. I mean, partially, because Diane, had to leave, it just sort of, it stopped to all intents and purposes. But I think we were doing a decent job of supporting her. I mean, it was not just a solo act, and it shouldn't be, it can't be. But I think, and people just have to make their own decisions about the time they can put in. But to my mind, it's particularly with you now aboard and really taking on, doing most of the work of the OIPA and the board. That is the way in which I think the board members can make their greatest contribution, is by helping that process of being out there. And we need, as has been said, we need to figure out how best to do it. But the answer is, yeah, Community Engagement Committee is a board committee. It needs to work with you and integrate with you and your staff about what's being done, but it's what we should do to carry out the effort.
Yeah, we just need to brainstorm it, figure out how to do it differently. Anyone else?
I do have
Yes.
one other comment, and it's not, we will not discuss tonight, but I know a couple months ago or so, there was a discussion, and it was brought to the board about moving the meetings to once a month. And I think from our side, work side, I think moving it to once a month is maybe something we need to talk about again, because there's just a lot of work we're going to be doing. I think we can bring in more substantial reporting and have better, accomplish more, and then make better use of that, our meeting time, than meeting every 2 weeks. So I just want to put that out there for consideration. Ms. Thompson gets paid overtime for this, so that is an additional cost. And unless we have substantial work to be done at the meeting, that, I have to look at that as a cost factor, and also as a staff factor to consider, because there's a lot of things we want to try to do, but we spend a lot of time, preparing for meetings and coming to meetings. So I think it's something to consider. I just want to put that out there.
Okay. You probably already know that I don't agree with the once a month thing, primarily because of the public. And I look and see what the numbers are of people watching us online, and I don't want to become irrelevant to the public, but it's definitely something we can discuss. And like everything else, whatever the consensus ends up being, whatever the vote ends up being, that's what it'll be. But I personally think we should not go to once a month for the sake of staying relevant to the public and letting the public know what we're doing and how we're doing everything.
Well,
Mr. Gibbons?
I just want to.
Go ahead.
I just want to add one quick thing. I don't believe, when I say once a month, I'm talking about regular meetings. Obviously, if there's a critical incident, obviously, if there's a pressing issue, then as a board, you can call a meeting, every week. But I think just to continue in this reign, I don't think that is good for everybody. I don't think it's best for everybody. I think when we have, when something happens, we have a pressing issue, obviously, we're going to come together and do what we need to do. But I don't think we need to do it every 2 weeks or twice a month or, bi-weekly. And that's my opinion. Okay, and I'm just putting it out there. I know the hour's getting late, and I didn't want to. I want to plant this because we're getting ready to come into the fall, and I'm just looking at from our side the work that we do, and how best to manage the time that we have and do the best work. And I just don't see doing it every 2 weeks as being as effective as setting a time where we come in and we've had a chance for our committees to come together and gives people more time to get that kind of work done. I think we can be more effective as a board by doing that.
I hear you. I respect your opinion. I'm chuckling because when we started, we were doing once a week, and then we, as a board, fought over going it to every 2 weeks, and then we conceded to every 2 weeks, and now we want to go to once a month. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, next it'll be once every 6 months or once every 3 months or something like that. I'm worried about it continuing to be delayed more and more, but that's probably me, just my mind just moving faster than my thoughts. Mr. Gibbons?
Ms. Vice Chair, I think it's probably most appropriately a governance issue, unless anyone disagrees, and I'll put it on that agenda for initial discussion.
For the next governance meeting?
Well, next or whenever we have time in governance, yeah.
Okay. I mean, obviously, however the majority votes for it, we'll put it up for a vote, and however the majority votes for it.
I'm only saying just as a place to discuss it.
To discuss it in
depth
governance?
and possibly bring a recommendation.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Thank you.
I just would like to say, as we've talked about community engagement a little bit today, I just want to keep our minds open to the idea that I don't think it would be disengaging with the public. I think it might be with how we're revamping community engagement. It might be a way for us to engage in a different capacity. Mm-hmm. So as we're thinking about this kind of revamping a community engagement, maybe us bringing this discussion forth again about our timing of our full board meetings, that doesn't mean that we're going to be engaging any less. It just looks a little bit different. So I think that might be something that we can definitely discuss in governance, but I think it will also be in tandem with how we envision community engagement as well.
That's a good idea. That's something to think about. Yep. Thank you, Ms. Castle. Anybody else?
I don't know who's on the Community Engagement Committee, but it seems like almost all of us have ideas about, how it, I don't know what it was before, so I don't have a frame of reference as to how it should change, but it seems like we all have pretty good ideas about what it should look like going forward. So whenever the next committee meeting is called for, I hope that most of us can show so we can really brainstorm this thing, because it is pretty important.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Okay, if there's nothing else, I guess we'll adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Mr. Gibbons?
You can do a voice vote.
Oh, yeah, I have to do that? Okay. All in favor of adjournment? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.